Samuel was doing the laundry when the doorbell rang. He didn't intend to open. He never had company, so it was probably someone begging for money or selling something. The bell rang again, somehow weakly, and it sparked his curiosity. He wiped his hands on the kitchen towel and walked to the door. He didn't see anyone at first and almost closed the door again, but then a small movement caught his attention. A young woman was sitting on the porch. She had blonde hair that fell to her shoulders and blue eyes. She was pale beyond her complexion and looked frail. She was shivering. "Hello there," Samuel said. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered and cleared her throat. "Please, I need help. I live next door. I wouldn't bother you, but I have no one else I can turn to." Her breathing was shallow, and she paused for a moment, gathering strength. She had some sort of a foreign accent, but he couldn't figure it out when she was so breathless and spoke so quietly. "Please," she said, "can you please go to the pharmacy for me and get my medicine, and some food for my kitten? Please, I'm too weak to go myself." She lifted her hand and offered him a piece of paper and some coins. He took them, too surprised to figure out how to refuse. "Please," she whispered. Her hand fell down like it was too heavy to hold up. He looked at the note and the cash, then back at her. Well, why not? She looked truly pitiful, and as a recluse himself he knew well enough how awful it was to be sick alone. Besides, it wasn't like he had anything to do that evening or any day. "Well, okay," he said. "Need help getting back inside?" She tried to stand up, her legs trembling, and nodded. She seemed embarrassed to need the help, but too sick to decline. He stepped back inside to get his coat and wallet, helped her up from the step, and supported her as they walked to the next door of the row house. She was shorter than him, and he held her by the waist when they covered the short distance slowly. Her door was ajar, but the inner door was closed, and he remembered about the cat. He opened the door carefully and helped her inside. She collapsed on the armchair with a sigh. "I'll be right back," he said awkwardly. "Take the key," she whispered and gestured towards the shelf. He picked up keys from the hook on the table and tried it on the door. It fit. He put it in his pocket. "Are you sure you're all right?" he asked, hovering in the doorway. "Should I call an ambulance?" No, I'll be fine once I get my medicine," she said and drew a few ragged breaths. "It's just asthma, it just sounds awful." She closed her eyes and coughed, pulling a blanket over herself and curling up. He couldn't think of anything more to say, so he left. He didn't have a car, so he walked towards the shopping center near the train station, eyeing her note. She wanted flu medicine, painkillers, and medication for her asthma. She had included the prescription and handwritten consent for someone else to fetch them. He hoped that would be enough. She had also listed the cat food brands. There was no mention of anything for her to eat. Johanna Ackerblom, he read from the prescription, so she was a foreigner. Johanna. He wondered how it was pronounced, and if her friends called her Jo. He went to the grocery store first as it was closer. He considered getting her some food, despite not being asked, and settled for chocolate. You probably couldn't go wrong with chocolate. Varieties of heart-shaped Valentine's Day assortments were on display, but he chose a regular chocolate bar with no nuts in case she was allergic. The pharmacy wasn't as big of a success. He got everything else on the list, but, as he'd suspected, her handwritten consent wasn't enough, because it didn't appoint him specifically to be the one to fetch the medication. He received a form to fill out for her to sign. The pharmacist seemed sympathetic but didn't budge in the requirement, so he decided to get her signature and come back right away. It felt a little tedious, but her breathing had been so pained he didn't have a heart not to try. She probably really needed her asthma medication. He walked back and let himself into her apartment, feeling uneasy. She was still on the sofa, apparently asleep. He went into the kitchen. There were bowls for the cat, and he filled the dry food bowl up and changed the water. There was no sign of the cat. Maybe it was timid. He put the flu medication on the kitchen table, and on a whim, peeked into her cupboards. There were a few cans of preserves, a box of crackers with only crumbs left at the bottom, a few portions of soup in a cup, and half a packet of rice. The fridge held only bottles of condiments. He thought she probably didn't want to bother anyone and was hoping she could get to the store herself once she had her medicine. The thought that she had asked for her cat made him feel really bad. It made it sound like she knew she wouldn't be strong enough to go and didn't want her pet to go hungry. What about herself? She would only get weaker if she didn't eat. Right then, he needed her signature and her medication. He searched for a pen and filled out the pharmacy form, checking the spelling of her name letter by letter. He filled up his own details and went to ask for her to sign it. Hi, he said quietly, hovering awkwardly beside the sofa. She didn't react. She looked small in her sleep, curled up on her side. Her hair was a messy tangle of light yellowish strands. He didn't remember ever seeing anyone with such fine hair. It looked sleek and slippery, silken. He thought of fairy tale princesses. Her ear was small and rosy red like a piece of jewelry peeking out from her hair. He shook his head and touched her shoulder carefully. She mumbled something. "I need you to sign this, please," he said, and offered her the form. She fumbled for the pen and scribbled something to where he pointed. He felt immensely relieved. "Do you need something now? Water? Painkillers?" he asked, but she had drifted off again. He let himself out and hurried back to the pharmacy. The pharmacy form worked like a charm, and he felt a sense of accomplishment when he stepped out with her medicine. His way back went past the grocery store, and he stepped in and bought all sorts of food one might like to eat while being sick. Soup, yogurt, candy, salty crackers, more chocolate, different juices, tea, and honey. He let himself back into her place again, a little more sure of himself. There was still no sign of the cat, but some of the cat food had disappeared. He needed to use the bathroom, and while he was there, he noticed the cat box was filthy. He emptied it and put new litter in. There was a small pile of recyclable rubbish bags filled with dirty litter in the corner, and he scooped them up to take them to the outside bin. He set her medicine, juice, and tea with a hefty dollop of honey on the coffee table and started to wake her up. "Hey," he said and nudged her. "Johanna?" He hoped he pronounced it anything like it should be pronounced. "Come on, wake up, take your medicine." She stirred, but he had to almost lift her before he could get her to sit up. She tasted the tea and juice obediently and used the asthma inhaler with a well-practiced routine. Then she seemed to lose her strength again and slumped backwards to lean on the back of the sofa. Her face was pale and clammy, her eyes glossy, and her breathing still sounded like it could stop any minute. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Can I do something more for you?" He could see her trying to concentrate. She said a word that sounded like a name. She got a little livelier and tried to get up. He said. She tried to concentrate on him. "Catten," she said, the cat, Moosey." "I put out water and dry food and changed the litter," he said. "Want me to give it canned food as well?" She stared at him, squinting her eyes like the light hurt her. She nodded. He smiled, hoping it came out as encouraging, and went to open a can of cat food and put it in a bowl next to the dry food. There was still no sign of the cat. She was still sitting nearly upright, slumping against the back of the sofa, when he came back to the living room. He sat beside her. "Listen, Johanna," he said. "When was the last time you ate? Can I make you some soup?" "I don't know," she said. "I've been sleeping." "Uh-huh," he said. "Well, how about you go back to bed and I'll make you some soup, huh? You'll feel better if you eat." He didn't know if it was true, but he really hoped so. He helped her upstairs to her bedroom, and she was so weak she leaned heavily on him. She felt small, soft, and vulnerable. He did his best to be gentle and touch her as little as possible, and still her proximity made his heart thump. He was a loner, and to be this close to anyone, let alone a pretty girl, was highly unusual for him. He realized her bedroom shared a wall with his, and her bed was against it just as his was. He helped her in, tucking the covers up to her chin. "Okay there?" he asked. "I'll bring up the tea and stuff, and the soup when I get it done." He took the juice, tea, and medicine upstairs and set them on the bedside table. Johanna looked like she was sleeping. Her breathing was still heavy and labored. He thought of opening a window, but then the cat might escape. Samuel went back to the kitchen and warmed up some soup. Midway through, a lanky white cat sneaked in. It avoided him the best it could, and settled in to eat so that it could keep an eye on him as he stood by the stove. "Well, hello, Musa," he said. The cat didn't seem impressed. Maybe it was his pronunciation. He laughed at himself, realizing he was worried what a cat was thinking about him. He had always been an introvert and not very good at making friends or keeping up relationships. After finishing school, his few friends had scattered around the country, and now he was effectively a hermit. He met people at work, but he did a lot of telecommuting, and even when he went to the office, he hardly talked with anyone. Outside work? Never. His longest conversation in months had probably been with the pharmacist trying to figure out how he could buy Johanna's medicine. Still, to be nervous of a cat seemed like overkill, even by his standards. He took the soup up to her. Johanna was disinterested but ate a few spoonfuls, and a few more when he fed them to her. It felt really weird but somehow nice to feed her, to take small portions at the tip of the spoon, and try not to drop any on her covers. After she was done eating, he couldn't think of anything more he could do for her. He fidgeted for a few minutes. It didn't feel right to just leave her, but staying felt just as wrong. Eventually he decided to leave, but to keep her keys so he would be able to come back and check on her later. That way she wouldn't have to get up to answer the door. Samuel returned home. He tried watching TV, listening to music, and reading. He tried going to sleep, but all he could think of was the bed at the other side of the wall. He touched it, spreading his fingers. He wondered if he should move his bed further away. He was worried about Johanna. Her breathing was so labored and sounded so awful, wheezing in her chest like that. She had said she'd be okay, that it was just asthma. But did she really know? He was torn between respecting her privacy and wanting to take care of her. Close to midnight, he surrendered. He sat up and called the round-the-clock healthcare advice number. They advised it would be best to monitor her condition, and if it appeared she didn't get enough oxygen, he should call the ambulance. He asked how he would know if she was getting enough oxygen. They told him to monitor the color of her lips, fingers, and toes. Now how was he supposed to do that? He pressed his ear against the wall, but of course heard nothing. He thought of her, alone, sick, maybe fighting to breathe. He put on a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt and went back to her place. She was still alive and still very sick. All the drink, medicine, and soup were just as he had left them. She was still breathing heavily, and it sounded just as awful as before. He went to take the soup away. Musa had eaten all the canned cat food and most of the dry. He considered filling the dry food bowl up but didn't dare. There was still some left, and he didn't know how much food was too much for a cat. He changed the water anyway and checked the cat box. He took a big glass of cold water upstairs. Johanna was restless, tossing and turning, and he tried to get her to drink. She was hot as a cinder, but sweaty. Her hair was sticking to the skin of her forehead and neck. He tried to wipe the hair off her face and murmured something soothing. She mumbled something back. He didn't think she knew he was there. He went through her closets until he found towels, and he wet a small one with cool water and sat down on her bedside to wipe her face. The effect was instantaneous. She soothed, stopped fidgeting, and pressed her face lightly against the towel. "Oh, that's better, is it?" he said quietly. "You poor thing." She was so hot. He was a little worried, but he had no thermometer and didn't know if she did. He kept wiping her forehead, cheeks, and neck. She had on a pajama shirt with buttons in front, and after a moment's consideration he unbuttoned the top one and wiped the pit between her collarbones. He kept turning the towel so that it would cool against her skin, and went to wet it after her scorching skin had warmed it again. He puffed up her pillows the best he could to get her head higher and to ease her breathing. He opened the window for a few minutes to let cool night air into the room, then closed it again, fearing the draft would be bad for her. He tried to remember if feverish patients should be kept cool or warm. He was sure he had heard it once, but couldn't remember, and now he was anxious he would make her feel worse. She was restless, making small agitated movements and muttering something unintelligible. He reacted instinctively and reached out to touch her cheek softly. "Hush," he said quietly. "Just try to rest." She relaxed a little and pressed her head against his hand. Her face was so small and delicate. He didn't have the biggest hands, but next to her cheek his palm seemed enormous. He stroked her soft skin carefully. Slowly, and like he was in a dream, Samuel lay down on the edge of the bed. She was in the middle but moved a little to give him space. He settled down and pulled her into his arms, her head on his shoulder. She pressed closer and sighed deeply, muttering something in a language he didn't know. He was delighted and terrified. She was going to be livid with him for sure when she got back to her senses. A plea to run her errands surely didn't include an invitation to get into her bed. Still, she was more at ease now that he held her, and he realized her head was properly elevated on his shoulder, making her breathe a little easier. He felt like he was actually helping her, and it made him feel better about being there. After a few minutes, he realized he was relaxing as well. There was something very comforting in being so close to another human being. It had been a long, long time since he'd been this close to anyone. He wasn't cut out for casual relationships, so the last time must have been with Susan, and it was it 5 years already? No. 4. Johanna's feverish dreams were restless, and she stirred every once in a while to utter words in a language Samuel now thought was maybe Swedish or Danish. She quieted down every time, if he just said something soothing and stroked her a bit, her matted sweaty hair or her narrow back. She didn't exactly smell like roses, but he didn't mind. He drifted slowly to sleep as well, holding her. Samuel woke up. It took a moment to remember where he was and why. He blinked in the pre-dawn gloom and wondered what had awoken him. The clock on the nightstand was 5:30. Johanna twitched beside him, and he turned his attention to her. She was breathing better and didn't seem as restless as before. She let out a soft sound and made a small movement, pressing closer to him. "Johanna," he whispered. She wasn't awake, and she didn't wake at his whisper. She quieted for a minute and then let out a heavy breath. She was dreaming. He hesitated, not knowing if she needed soothing or not. She didn't seem as agitated as before, her back pressed against his side, and he could feel her wonderful round bottom against his hip. She made the sound again and jerked a little. It was a moan. He blushed furiously when he suddenly realized what kind of a dream she was having. Oh, damn it. He was petrified. He was intrigued. To his horror, he got excited. He was acutely grateful his body was pointed away from her so she didn't feel it. She moved a little more, her hips rolling and sighed. Her dreams resonated in her body, making her press against him and move her hips. She moaned again, and her breathing got heavier. He wondered what she was dreaming about, what would make her sound so wonderful. There was no denying how much this excited him. He was acutely aware of every place where her body touched his. He lay still with his heart thumping painfully in his chest. Oh God, there was absolutely no way to sleep again after that. He knew he had to sort himself out, but he didn't dare move until she relaxed more and rolled a little further from him. He got up as slowly and quietly as he could, tiptoed downstairs and into the bathroom. He remembered the sound she made. He thought about her small, delicate body and how much he would love to witness that for real. It would be so wonderful to get to touch her, to hear those small moans so that he would be the one drawing them out of her. He felt vague guilt and shame. He felt like he had spied on her, that he'd seen, or heard, felt, witnessed, something that wasn't meant for him, something private. He flushed away the evidence of his excitement. He double-checked the bathroom to see whether he'd left a mess. He left the bathroom wondering what to do. He had work that day, and he knew he needed to get back home for that. He couldn't imagine getting any more sleep, and most definitely he couldn't imagine crawling back into her bed, now that she wasn't as sick as yesterday. And after that, he took up a fresh glass of water and put it on her nightstand. She seemed to be sleeping peacefully. He left her a note saying he had gone back home to work, leaving his cell number and a wish that she'd let him know how she was doing and if she needed anything. Then he filled up Mus's empty dry food bowl, changed the water in the water bowl, and went back to his own apartment. He lay down on his bed even when he knew he wouldn't sleep anymore. He touched the wall and thought of her, sleeping just a few feet away, on the opposite side of the wall. She texted him around 9 when he had been working on his computer for a few hours already. "Thank you so much for your help, Johanna." He stared out of the window, searching for words. "Don't mention it. Are you feeling better, Samuel?" "I am, and thanks for all the food. How much do I owe you?" "I don't know. I'd have to check from the receipt, but it's okay, really." She didn't answer for a while. He figured it might be the end of it, and with a sigh, got back to work. It was difficult to concentrate. He kept remembering her body next to his, how she had responded to his comfort. At lunchtime, he had an idea. He had planned on making himself pasta, and while he was preparing it, he sent her a text. "I'm making pasta for lunch. You want some?" Her answer came almost immediately. "I would love some, but I shouldn't exploit you like this." "Don't worry about it. Can you come over, or should I bring it to you?" "I don't know. I feel like I should come over, but I don't know if I can. I'll be over as soon as it's ready." He smiled as he was cooking. At least he would get to talk with her again. He mixed the sauce with the pasta thoroughly. He scooped up the food and some Parmesan cheese and walked next door. He still had the key, but he rang the doorbell anyway. She opened, they smiled at each other tentatively, and he went to the kitchen to set the pan down. He took plates and cutlery from the cupboards and started to set the table, then suddenly stopped. "Oh, am I being too pushy?" he asked. "I'm sorry." "It's all right," she said. She was sitting at the table, and now he noticed she was still in the same battered pajama shirt and loose college pants she'd had last night. She looked tired, dirty, and messy. She probably wasn't too perky even when she wasn't quite as ill as last night. "I just went through your cupboards yesterday, so I know where everything is," he continued. "I'm sorry, but you were kinda out of it and I couldn't ask you." He blushed a little and turned to the fridge. He felt like an idiot. "What do you want to drink?" he asked. "You've got apple, orange, or pineapple juice, and water." "I do, huh?" she said and smiled when he turned to look at her. She was pretty, even with her hair dirty and messy and wearing crumpled, baggy clothes. But when she smiled, she was truly beautiful. He was left speechless, holding the fridge door open, staring at her in awe. "I mean, it was you who bought all that, right?" she said, still smiling. "Well, yes," he stuttered. To break himself from his spell, he set all the juice cartons on the table. Then he explained how he had gone to the pharmacy but hadn't managed to get her medicine in the first go, so he had done a rerun with the pharmacy form. He recounted how he had observed her lack of reserves while putting the cat food out, and how he had decided to buy her some groceries. "I mean, you were quite sick," he said feebly. "I didn't know what you liked, so I bought a little of everything." "That was really nice of you," she said. "I didn't want to burden you." Now he realized she was probably meaning to say he had been too assuming. "Well," he said, "I live by myself, so I know how much it sucks to be sick alone. But I'm sorry if I've been too pushy. I know I at least shouldn't have spent the night here. You know I was here last night, right?" he asked, suddenly concerned she didn't even know. She nodded. "You had such a high fever and your breathing was so awful I was just worried. I called the health line and they told me to monitor you, and I didn't know how to do that without being here with you. I do realize it's awful of me to barge into your bed like that. I'm sorry." He looked at his plate, at her, at his plate again. "I'll just shut up now," he concluded meekly. "No, it's okay," she said, "more than okay. I didn't expect you to be so caring. I don't know anyone, so I had no one to ask, but then finally I just had to. I'm glad it was you. I don't know how to ever pay you back." She gestured over her food. "And now this," she said, "and you even cleaned up after my cat." He shrugged. "I'm just glad you're feeling better. I'll give you your keys back now." She didn't say anything. They ate in silence. Afterwards they both hovered uncomfortably, and then she said, "Would you keep the keys?" "Yes, if you think it's best," he said, picking up his pan to go. His heart was thumping in his chest. She probably meant for him to come back, if she wanted him to keep the keys, and he couldn't really grasp what it implied. "Are you all right for now? Do you need anything?" "No, I'm good," she said. She moved to hug him for thanks, and then she seemed to realize she was in her grubby home clothes and, quite frankly, filthy. She blushed, deep red. "I'm sorry," she mumbled. "I'm disgusting. I didn't realize." "No, you're not," he said encouragingly, and stroked her arm a little with the hand not holding the pan. "Just take a long bath, you'll feel better." "Do you have a bathtub?" she asked. "Yeah, don't you?" he replied. "You want to use mine?" He suddenly realized he was being overly pushy again. They didn't know each other, and he had no reason to assume she would want to come to his place to bathe, of all things. He blushed. "I'd like that," she said. They looked at each other, both with their cheeks burning. He turned to the door, thoroughly out of balance. "You want to come over now or sometime later?" he asked. "I need to work, but you can come bathe if you wanna." He almost hoped she would say later, so he would have time to recompose himself, but she followed him to his place. He showed her to the bathroom and went back to work. He calmed gradually when he wasn't face to face with her anymore, but thinking of her naked in his bathtub didn't help very much. He thought of her slender body. Now that was a thought that definitely didn't help him concentrate on his work. He realized he hadn't given her a towel. He went to get one and spotted his bathrobe hanging on his bedroom door. He picked it up as well and went to knock on the bathroom door. "Johanna," he said, "I brought you a towel and a bathrobe, all right? I'll just leave them here." There was a sobbing sound from the bathroom. "Are you all right?" he asked. She sobbed again. He hovered behind the door, conflicted. He couldn't enter. She was naked in there, but he couldn't ignore her crying. "Johanna, talk to me," he said. "Why are you crying?" She sobbed again. "I'm sorry," she said with a stuffy voice. "I just feel so stupid." "Why?" he asked. She didn't answer. "Listen, I'll just leave these out here, okay? Please come talk to me when you're done. I'll be in the living room." He walked away, and it felt like he had abandoned her. He went to put the kettle on and thought he'd offer her afternoon tea after she had bathed. 10 minutes later, Johanna appeared. She stood by the living room doorway, wrapped in his gray fluffy bathrobe that was way too big for her. Her eyes were red, and she looked insecure and unhappy. "Hi there," he said and got up, pushing his laptop away. "I was making tea. You want some?" She shrugged, and he walked towards her to get to the kitchen. She looked so pitiful that an overwhelming need to just hold her filled his heart, and he stopped in front of her. "I hope you weren't crying because of me," he said and touched her arm. She looked like she wanted to flee. Her eyes darted from him to away, and she said quietly, "No, not like that. I just felt so stupid when I realized I didn't bring a towel or a change of clothes or anything. I just barged in here. And then you brought me the towel and the robe, and it was so nice of you I cried some more. Does that even make sense? You've been so good to me. I'm not used to people being so good to me." Relief washed through his system. Maybe he hadn't been too pushy after all. Her eyes were a little glossy, and without thinking he lifted his hand from her arm and touched her forehead. "I think your fever is going up again," he said. "Come on, sit down, I'll get you some tea." She curled up in an armchair, legs folded under her, and sipped her tea obediently. She shivered every now and then, and he guessed she was chilly now that her temperature was rising. They chatted, talked about his work, then hers, then some general talk about the recent events in the neighborhood. She was 3 years younger than his 29 and worked mostly from home, just like he did. She was Swedish, like he'd guessed. She had come to Britain for a student exchange 4 years ago and decided to stay. She was easy to talk to when she wasn't so upset. At times, he even forgot to be shy and embarrassed. She seemed more relaxed as well, but she also looked tired. "Do you want to borrow some of my clothes?" he asked. "Or do you want me to go and get some of yours? I think it might do you good to lie down for a while. You look a little pale again." She blushed lightly and said, "Do you mean here?" "Well, however you wish," he said. "I hadn't thought about it. But even if you went home, I would really like to come and check up on you later. I worry about you." It was maybe a bit much to say, but she didn't look taken aback. Instead, she agreed. She asked meekly if he would let her borrow the robe, and then she went back home. He tried to wrap up his work and think about other things than her. After he finished his work, he agonized over how late later was supposed to be. He wanted to go to her, but didn't want to seem too intrusive. Around 7, he gave up and went over to her place. He considered ringing the doorbell, but settled on using the keys, thinking she might be sleeping. She was buried under a pile of blankets so that all he could see was the mop of her golden hair on the pillow. He sat on the edge of the bed. "Hi, Johanna," he said quietly. She didn't answer, and he nudged her lightly. She still didn't react, and he tried her forehead. She was really hot once again. He considered waking her up for dinner, but he knew well how fever killed the appetite, and she had eaten well enough at lunch. He let her sleep and went downstairs to make a few sandwiches for himself and feed the cat. Musa came up to him the moment he opened the can of cat food. He set the food down, and the cat allowed him to pet it a little. After a minute, it turned its yellow eyes up to him as if to say, "Really? Don't you have someplace to be?" Samuel did. He went back upstairs and sat by Johanna, guarding her in her sleep. She was so cute. She looked so young when she slept. He let her golden locks flow through his fingers and marveled at the silky quality. He thought he should go. She was all right. She had a fever, but her breathing was much better than the previous night. He had no reason to think she would drop dead if he wasn't keeping an eye on her. Yet he didn't leave. He sat and watched her sleep, stroking her hair. She woke up with a jolt and turned to look at him. "Samuel?" "Hi there," he said softly. She answered with a sleepy ramble in Swedish. The only thing he could distinguish was his own name, which she repeated a few times. "I wish I knew what it is you just said," he said gently. She looked at him, or at least his general direction, her eyes shining with fever. He touched her cheek lightly. She took hold of his hand with hers and pulled on it, tugging him closer. To hell with it, he just didn't want to go. He lay down next to her and she moved over to give him room. He snuggled next to her, and she pressed into his arms like she'd always been there, like she belonged there. He wrapped his arms around her and breathed in the scent from her hair, a whiff of his own shampoo but also of her. A little stuffy and sweaty again now that she was so sick. He thought she could smell atrociously and he'd love it. She mumbled something in Swedish again and relaxed, her arm around his waist. He held her and felt his heart swell almost painfully. She was so small and soft and adorable. He just wanted to do everything in his power to keep her safe, make her happy, make everything right for her. He stroked her narrow, hot back with the tips of his fingers, tracing the edge of her shoulder blade. His mom always used to say that's where angels' wings were attached, and he pictured her as an angel, one of those impossibly pretty ladies in his childhood picture books. It wasn't even difficult to picture, though he'd always thought angels were really tall. She had on a nightgown tonight, not the baggy type of pajama shirt she'd had earlier. It was soft and felt good under his palm. In addition to that, oh God. He felt her hot legs against his sweatpants, and by the feel of it he suspected they were nude. It was unnerving enough, but then she moved a little to get closer, and he realized it felt like she had no underwear on. Suddenly he got very warm. He pushed the blankets off his side that wasn't against her and adjusted himself, making sure he didn't poke her. He was excited again, and he thought he probably would be for the entire night. He remembered her dream from last night, and it certainly didn't help matters. Now he regret staying. He was certain she would be appalled if she woke up and found him like this. He tried to get back to the angelic thoughts, but it was difficult once he'd let himself get on this more carnal level. He pictured himself with horns sticking from his forehead and a pitchfork in his hand and suppressed a nervous giggle. She was sleeping peacefully, and it consoled him to know she knew nothing of his thoughts. Samuel woke up with Johanna snug against him. He held on to her quite tightly, one arm under her head and one hand on her stomach. His nose was nuzzled to the nape of her neck, and her scent filled his head with every breath. She smelled so good, somehow warm and familiar. He thought wistfully how wonderful it would be to get used to that scent, to wake up to it every morning and fall asleep with it every night. He could feel her warm, nimble body against all of his front side. She felt warm but not burning hot anymore. He breathed out a quivering sigh. Was she sleeping? Maybe she hadn't noticed. He almost panicked but didn't dare move. Besides, it felt so good. She stirred. She was going to wake up and catch him pressing against her. Any second now. She moved against him, rubbing herself against him, and he sighed again. I'm sorry, he whispered. Why? She asked, just as quietly. Well, because you've got excited? Don't be, it feels nice. Nice? He asked, not comprehending. Samuel, she said quietly, still rubbing against him lightly, still her back towards him. Would you make love with me? What? He said weakly. She turned her head a little so that his nose got closer to her ear. Well, this is a little embarrassing, but I kind of want you, and I don't want to wait. I don't want to date and take weeks to get to it. I mean, I wouldn't mind dating you, but I would really want to just skip all that and have you right now, but please say no if you don't want to. Some people think men always want it, but it's okay not to, you know. She had stopped her grind and just waited for his answer. Was this some sort of a joke? It didn't feel like a joke. He wanted nothing in life more than to make love to her right now. I really do want to make love to you, he said sincerely. But are you still sick? I think you're a bit warm still. Not too sick, I reckon, she said, and took hold of his hand, which was still on her abdomen. She pushed it lower, and he got her hint and started to move it himself. He found the hem of her nightgown and her warm skin underneath. He went up to her stomach first, touching the same spot he'd touched over her gown. Her skin was perfect, soft, and warm and smooth. He searched for her belly button, swept over it lightly, and traced downward. He was breathing heavy, but so was she. She pressed against him and lifted her right leg up over his to give him more space. You're perfect, he whispered and kissed her neck. You're easily impressed, she whispered back and moaned. They kissed. Her lips were soft and delicious, her morning breath not so much so. There was nothing short of a heart attack that could have stopped him now. He thought they went together really well. There was an easy compatibility in the way their bodies met. She fit him like a glove, and he struggled to stay slow. She tugged on the hem of his t-shirt impatiently and pulled it over his head. Her slim, soft hands caressed his chest and shoulders. The house could have collapsed and he wouldn't have noticed. He stopped thinking. He was all feeling. Her amazing body answered him as she moaned. "Snälla, lite mera, lite längre," she panted. Eventually they both finished. He fell on her slowly, taking care to land a little to her left, not to put his whole weight on her. He never wanted to leave. She held him, her arms around his shoulders, her breathing on his hair getting more regular as she calmed down. She turned a little. He let out a small sound of disappointment, then felt acutely embarrassed about it. All the complexity of human relations was catching up on him again, after this brief moment of letting it all go, letting their bodies do the talking. He wondered how it had been for her. It was a little hurried, wasn't it? But maybe it wasn't that bad. She had said something, there towards the end. "What was it you just said there?" he asked quietly. She said and kissed his forehead. It felt really good, tender. "You said something in Swedish a moment ago." "I have no idea," she said. "Kinda lost it there, it felt so good." His heart jumped. "So you liked it?" She snorted. "That doesn't really cover it, but yes, I liked it. You?" He let out a sound that was part relief, part the impossibility of putting his feelings into words. She was waiting. She wanted him to verbalize it. "I loved it," he said sincerely. He wondered if it was too strong, but hell, he couldn't help it. He really did love it with her. "Yeah, that's it," she said quietly. "I loved it too." She moved and he moved with her. He ended up on his back and she snuggled against him. He held her close, feelings churning inside him. He still had his pants around his legs and now he kicked them away. A little embarrassed, he had been in such a hurry he hadn't even undressed properly. She was soft against him, soft and warm and sweaty. He stroked her hair, letting it slide between his fingers again and again. "Do you need to go to work?" she asked. He glanced at the clock. It was 20 to 7. It was Friday, so he did indeed have to go to work. He even had a video meeting at 9. He really didn't want to get up. He felt like it would break the spell, and he'd never get this close to her again. "I don't want to," he said moodily, feeling like a sullen kid. "Are you working from home today?" "Yeah." "There's only going to be a wall between us." "I don't want to have a wall between us." He was feeling more whiny and ridiculous by the second. He needed to get a grip. They hadn't really met until 2 days ago. They didn't know each other. They'd just slept with each other once. He had no right to want anything from her, but he did. He furiously and intensely wanted to. Wanted. He didn't know what, but he wanted to. He sighed and pulled her closer. "Listen, Johanna," he said, "can I make you breakfast?" "Sure you can," she answered, surprised. He kissed her for a few moments and got out of bed. He was still naked, but he didn't care. He padded downstairs and loaded the coffee maker. Musa came to swirl at his feet when he stepped into the kitchen. "Well, hello there," he said. "What do you want? It's not your feeding time." He started checking the fridge for breakfast. Musa kept a close eye on him. "Oh, I know," he said. "She gives you something, doesn't she?" He opened a tub of yogurt and held the top to Musa. It licked the lid clean, eyeing him appreciatively. He smiled. He liked cats, and maybe he would have had one if he wasn't so alone. He didn't want pets because he had no one to ask to take care of them if he wasn't able, for traveling or being sick. So it was easier to just not have them. He went back upstairs with coffee and the yogurt. Johanna was lying in bed watching him. For some reason, he didn't become self-conscious, even though he was naked in front of her. "How do you want your coffee?" he asked. "Black." He puffed up the pillow and got her to an upright enough position that she could eat in bed. Then he went back down to get his own coffee. He sat at the edge of the bed and watched her eat. She was so beautiful, delicate and fair. Her nightgown was pale pink, and it flowed on her body like something beautiful. He didn't want to go. He wanted to stay for the rest of his life. He didn't know what to say to her. She looked at him warily. I hope I didn't upset you, she said. I didn't mean to. Well, you kinda did. It was intense, but in a good way, don't worry. He looked at her and had a stroke of inspiration. Can I wash you before I go? What? She asked, puzzled. I'll show you, just tell me no if you don't like it, okay? He went to get a bowl of warm water and a small towel, like he'd had that first night. She was finished with her breakfast and now she just laid back on the pillow and watched him. He leaned closer and wiped her sweaty brow with the damp towel as gently as he could. He cleaned her face, her neck, behind her ears. She sat up, and in one fluid movement she lifted the nightgown over her head before she laid back down. He felt his breath catch in his throat and fought the urge to just ogle her chest. Instead he wiped her shoulders, her collarbones, and along the length of her arms that was closer to him. He could feel her eyes upon him and for some reason he felt like crying. He blinked a few times to force the tears back and cleaned her other arm. He washed her armpits, using enough force to not tickle, and after that, there was no avoiding it. He looked at her chest. He stared at her, mesmerized. He liked all of her, but for some reason her lower abdomen was what got him. It swelled gently upward from her mons, forming a perfect little hill of pale, soft, smooth skin. He let out a small sound and bent down to kiss it, then forced himself to sit back up and wipe it with the towel. He wiped her hips and then down one leg and up the other. It was an almost pious moment. He concentrated on her, and she concentrated on watching him. Neither of them said anything. He wiped her, trying not to be intimate, but she shivered anyway. Sorry, he said, and sorry about your sheets. He stared, horrified, at the puddle they had managed to produce together. Then a thought emerged, and he lifted his eyes to hers. Are you on the pill? He asked. Now you ask, isn't it a little late? She asked, but from her smile he guessed she was. Yeah, sorry, you kinda surprised me there. Didn't have that much time to think. They smiled at each other. Okay, roll over. I'll change the water, he said and went to the bathroom. He changed the towel as well. She was lying on her stomach when he got back. He sat beside her and grimaced at the wet spot. She had rolled off it, and now he got a look of the entirety of it. It was enormous, and looked somehow really sinful to him. He washed the back of her body as carefully as the front. She had the most wonderful dimples above her perfect round buttocks. He would have wanted to kiss them, and after some consideration he did. She shuddered but didn't object. Okay, all done, he said. Are you all right? Can I help you with something? She rolled over to her side to look at him. Thank you, she said quietly. That was really nice. He smiled coyly. I'll be just behind the wall, so call me if you need anything, okay? He said. He got up and looked at her. He really didn't want to leave. Can I bring you lunch later? He asked bashfully. She nodded. He lingered for a few moments but couldn't come up with anything more, and so he left. Again, it was difficult to concentrate on work. Samuel had to chat to his coworker to ask what had just been said in the video meeting they were attending. When he realized he had absolutely no idea. All he could think of was Johanna and their morning together. He could feel her like she was emitting some strange energy that he could sense through the wall separating their apartments. He knew one of his coworkers, Maya, was half Swedish. He wrestled with himself for a while, but eventually he chatted with her and asked if she would teach him to say something in Swedish. She called him, instead of replying to his chat. So what do you want to say to her? She asked. Her? He squirmed. Well, what else would encourage you to talk in tongues beside love? She asked, amused, and he realized he was really transparent. Well, let me think, he said. At least you should make the effort to learn to say her name right, Maya said. I guess even that will take you anywhere. So what is her name? Johanna, he said, and then they went back and forth for what seemed like an eternity, until Maya was pleased with his pronunciation. Good, yes, now just remembered that, she said. Now what else? I love you? Well, it's a bit much, I think, he said. We just met after all, but you'd want to be with her, date her? Well, yes, I would, so maybe that's it. Vill du dejta mig? Come again. It took them another few minutes to get him to remember the words and say them correctly. He thanked Maya and ended the call. He felt a little lightheaded and nervous, but he also knew he needed to pursue this now. He texted Johanna to ask if she still wanted lunch and if she would eat Chinese takeaway. She answered yes on both accounts. He walked to the shopping center and fetched the food, and on his way back, He passed a florist and stepped in. He looked at various Valentine's Day bouquets, each one more pompous than the last, and agonized. He didn't want to be too imposing, and eventually he settled for a single red rose. He arrived at her door and took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. He felt like his cheeks were as red as the flower, but there was no helping it. He was shy, and he was nervous, and this was important. He prayed he'd remember his sentence and the proper pronunciation of her name. She was surprised by the rose and seemed a little flustered, but she took it in her hand. "Johanna," he said, and her eyes shot up at him. She definitely noticed how he pronounced her name. "Vil du date mig?" She stared at him. "Vad sa du?" she said feebly. "Sorry, that's the limit of my Swedish," he said apologetically. He was standing one step lower than he was, so their eyes were almost level. She got tears in her eyes, and then she hugged him tightly. Yes, I'll date you." He held the takeaway with one hand and her with the other and was happier than he ever remembered being. "Good," he said quietly. "I was beginning to worry I'd been misled and I just said something incredibly rude to you." She giggled. Their hug was interrupted by Musa, running past their feet, seizing the opportunity now that the door was left open for a moment too long. He gave her the bag of food and spent the next 10 minutes chasing the cat around the yard. He did catch it eventually, and when he carried it back towards her door, it just settled into his arms and looked up at him with its yellow eyes, looking innocent and inconspicuous. "You little bugger," he whispered.